What is your take on the latest poll? We haven't had any polls since Saturday's attack. Is this going to have a material impact on the polling?
Well, we can't know for certain until we've got that polling back, but my thinking is it probably won't. If you go back to the atrocity in Manchester earlier on in the campaign, we saw a small increase in the gap in favour of the Conservatives over the weekend following that. But that's perhaps understandable given that it's the government that monopolises the news immediately after these things while the campaign is suspended. They're the people offering solutions. They're the people who can explain the details and things like that. But even then, the gap went from 5 to 7% and then back in the following days. This time around, the campaign was suspended for fewer than 24 hours. And Labour have gone very much back on the offensive with things, whereas that was a different position last time around. So maybe, but I don't think so.
I was reading a piece yesterday, I think the Times newspaper running a piece yesterday saying terror events don't always lead to better performance by right-of-centre parties in elections. Look at what happened in Spain in 2004, for example, just as one example that they cite. What is the experience there?
Well, if you look at the experience in this country, generally speaking, after attacks, whether it's Lee Rigby, whether it's 7/7, etc., there's not much change in the polling. When you look at things that happen during campaigns in other countries, because we haven't had that until this campaign before, there hasn't been much movement either. Spain is really the only exception to that, and that was, it's suggested, to do with the way that the government of the day specifically handled the attack in Madrid, blaming initially the Basque separatists ETA when it subsequently turned out to be Al-Qaeda. That created a lot of bad feeling. And it did make a difference, or it is reported to have made a difference. It didn't happen in France more recently. I don't think it will happen this time, but we'll see.
We're standing here on a very rainy day. Rain is one thing that affects turnout, I understand, on election days, Joe. Other things affect the turnout too. What are your expectations around turnout? Are we in danger of some sort of electoral fatigue here?
There's certainly the potential for electoral fatigue. For some people in this country, those in Scotland, this will be the fourth major electoral event in as many years. For everyone else, it's the third in 3 years. And so that could have an impact. And turnout will be crucial in this election. As pollsters, we're interested in who people support. But the most important element is whether those people actually turn out or not. It's that will determine the result of the election. And then how they turn out in each of the 650 individual constituencies in this country will determine the winners.
Because I spoke to Gina Miller, Better for Britain, who was here with us a little bit earlier on this morning. She, of course, took the government to court over part of the Brexit process and was successful in that. She's still involved in the campaign. She's on the doorsteps. She's pushing for something that looks like a softer Brexit. She was talking about turnout and suggesting that turnout really matters and suggesting that they have been very influential on getting young people to register to vote. And that is something that we have seen, isn't it? Young people registering to vote.
Yes, we've seen millions of people registering to vote, and many of those people are young people. But analysis of a similar phenomenon in the EU referendum shows that actually in a lot of cases those people were already registered. They were either registering again because they're updating their information, or they were simply registering with no need to do so because they'd seen lots of the adverts we have here saying you must be registered to vote. And so in the EU referendum, it didn't make much of a difference, those late registrations. We don't know what impact it will have here, but certainly the turnout of young people specifically, who historically have a much lower level of turnout, could determine the size of the majority for the Conservative government, or indeed if the Conservatives get a majority at all.
What about the ability that we have to turn percentages into seats? This is always the problem with our type of electoral system, isn't it? You've got a new model at Yougov that tries to do that. How confident are you that this is good at what it's supposed to be doing?
Well, in the old days, you'd get people turning on you turn on TV and you see people talking about a swingometer, and they'd use something called universal national swing. Now, for geeks like me, that's quite interesting, but basically all we need to know is that doesn't work anymore. The kind of swing happening the same across the entire country doesn't happen because of Scotland, because of the rise and collapse of UKIP. It all gets very complicated. Now, we've tried to replicate that complexity as far as we can for each of the 650 constituencies, and it's an experimental model which we think will provide a better insight than UNS, as we say. But the proof will be in the pudding.
And remind us, what does it say? What's your latest?
Well, our latest has a full range of possible outcomes. It could be anything from around 275 seats, which for the Conservatives, which would mean a hung parliament, to 345, which would mean a majority of around 20.
Okay.
So, broad range.